Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 83rd edition of the Frankenstein Chat. And as you can see, one of us has truly dressed up for the occasion, and the other one hasn't really tried. But Stan, hello, Stan. What a backdrop! What a suit! What a bow tie!
Yeah, I'm making an effort, although I'm absolutely stuffed full of a cold.
Are you poor thing?
So if my voice doesn't hold out, you'll have to just keep blathering on without me.
I think that there's nothing new in that, though, is there?
No.
We've always been covering for one another ever since we met each other. But anyway, as you can see, the last Frankenstein Chat of the year, and it's the annual awards. And we've never had a backdrop like that before, Stan, I have to say. And so it's amazing. Anyway, I'm not stuck because it's incredibly mild at the moment, and we're in North Wales, so it's been great, and we're walking later today, so I'm really looking forward to it. So the last day of 2021, and I suppose the first thing I want to say, Stan, is we've had over 30 guests, and what a difference the guests made to our chats.
Yeah, they certainly do.
The viewing figures go through the roof.
Perhaps, Frank, if we started off prior to having to do this via Zoom, when we used to meet in the pub and do it, maybe we should have invited a guest along to the pub chat every week. That made it a bit better.
I agree. But yeah, so we've had some amazing guests, and I think the thing that I think we've tried to do is get a balance between those who are, judged to be eminent, so we've had a number of professors and whatever on the chat, but also looking to make sure that we hear younger voices and those either working as teachers or whatever, or working in children's services who have got a much younger perspective on things, and actually making sure that we still go back to listen to people who are currently teaching or working in schools. So I think we've been really blessed with the people that we've had on, and I suppose I want to just thank them all for their efforts and their support of this, because they don't know what they're letting themselves in for.
No.
And as these are unscripted, we don't know what we're going to say. So but anyway, we have been looking at the who might win an award this year. And before we start, I thought I'd just let you know that the number of people watching and listening to our chats each week has doubled this year compared to our first year in 2020. And the length of time that people listen to these videos and these downloads has gone up as well. So, I think it's a sort of testament to the fact that, whatever it is, Stan, that people still want to listen to us wittering on each week.
It defies understanding.
Somebody said to me, though, that what's come through is there's sort of like that we've known each other for so long that we make it easy for guests to feel comfortable,
Yeah. Well, I think we're always in awe of our guests, aren't we? I mean, most of our guests, as you said, either bring an expertise that we don't necessarily have, or the chalk face at the moment and can tell us what it's really like when we can only perceive that from our kind of lofty position now.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think we've some of you that watch and listen to us will know that we've sent little thank you awards out to our guests who have been on the show right from the beginning, and we intend to do that going forward next year. But it's been really nice the way that people have tweeted them, taken photographs, sent us emails, said nice things about the chat. They still, even though somebody appeared getting on well over a year ago, they still remember it as a good occasion, a nice thing to do, and it's lovely that people want to come back on for a second. Or in the case of Paul Duckworth, it must be now third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. No, I think it's Paul's.
Desperate for the publicity, Paul.
I know. Paul's the guest disappeared most often, so that award goes to Paul Duckworth. So, and I'm sure Paul will be on again in 2022. But anyway, should we have a look at? Should we do the political awards first, Dan? Should we have a look at? And then
I think we missed one though, which I think we should introduce at the very last minute.
Oh, right.
That's the Ministerial Hide and Seek Champion 2021, which I'm going to propose Boris Johnson, who seems to have disappeared this week.
Well, actually, Stan, where are you at the moment? I mean,
that's the mystery. I'm in the country, is the only answer I'm going to give.
Yeah, but which country? I just want to know the country you're in.
It's an independent state.
I know it is interesting, isn't it? The way that when you, it's not as if you need to be, that experience to know when you think somebody's lying, and that, if all of this comes back, I mean, this is just another nail, isn't it? It just feels that just wasn't convincing whatsoever. He'll come back with a tan soon.
I do think he wins the award, and I think the runners-up have to be Michael Gove, who seems to have disappeared for some time now. You couldn't possibly think why. And also perhaps the Duke of York, who seems to have disappeared off the scene for a while.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to bring all this back to education, which is what we try to do, Stan.
Well, I suppose I have known in the past head teachers who disappeared at convenient times.
Yes, yeah.
But I mean, thankfully, in education, you managed to track them down.
It has been known, isn't it, that head teachers have lost their jobs because they have tried to get an early flight from an airport on perhaps the last day of the term and have been found queuing up. I suppose politicians, because of the security around them, can sort of drift into the special sort of entrances to airports and security. Anyway, so what about the most unbelievable statement of the year, Stan?
The trouble is, there's been so many. There really has been so many. My favourite is Dominic Raab recently looking at the picture of the of the work meeting at number 10 and saying they're all wearing suits. Yes, but they're all wearing suits. No, they're not. We can see the same picture. There are ways of trying to insist you are right, but actually to tell people that they're wearing suits where everybody can see the picture.
I know. But also, I mean, that's awful, isn't it? But the other thing around around this time last year, people were talking about how getting back to school, and we'd had all that nonsense around the Department of Education trying to legally enforce something on some London boroughs who wanted to close early for Christmas. And at this time, we were probably seeing last year a number of ministers on television saying it's perfectly safe for children to go back to school. And it was it the 2nd of January on Andrew Marr's show, where we were assured that everything would be fine, children going back tomorrow. Well, they all went back tomorrow, but they were all closed the next day. If ever schools were not safe, they're still not safe.
And there's if you think from that time, the only mitigation that's really been added to schools is a CO2 monitor to tell you it's not safe, but no ventilation systems to make it safer. Yeah.
Which actually, when you think what they're spending on these emergency hospitals at the moment in car parks and the cost of that, apart from the fact I think there's great doubt as to who's going to man or who's going to actually service them, that actually, if they'd spent that money on better ventilation, that would have been a benefit going forward. This is money that's going to be used to set up something that might not be used, that might not have any value because nobody can service them. But actually putting ventilation permanently into schools would have been a benefit for the future. And if there is another pandemic, heaven help us, but if there is, then schools will be better equipped to cope with them. So what do you think then?
The other one was that the rules were followed at all times. There wasn't a gathering, but if there was a gathering, the rules were followed at all times. But by having a gathering, you've broken the rules.
I know, and the fear is that actually, I think there's a strong suspicion that rules were not followed at all times. No. But actually, the inquiry that's going to be looking into that, it will be very interesting to see how that, how that is delivered.
You couldn't write it, could you, Frank? If a comedy team wrote that story, if it was on Yes Minister, you'd be saying, no, it's not really, you've missed it now. Especially when the guy who's nominated to investigate it turns out to have been at a party himself.
I know.
But you can just see Sir Humphrey trying to talk his way out of it, can't you?
Well, there was something, wasn't there?
Schools are safe.
On Yes Prime Minister, don't bother suggesting that you're going to have an inquiry if you don't think you're going to get out of it through the inquiry. So obviously an inquiry led by people that are linked or surrounded or within that environment. I mean, the Lord Guyte thing at the moment over the decoration of the Prime Minister's flat, and how that's being resolved. This isn't going to settle. I mean, I think these sorts of things will just stick. I think these things will stick in the back of people's minds. But so do you think then that it's going to be Raab, or do you think it's going to be the ministers that said it was safe in January?
I think we've got to say, because of our background in education, it was the number of people who insisted schools would be open. Following that, that was the unbelievable statement. They would be open and safe.
Well, and some go back next week, some go back the week after. Stockport goes back the week after. So I'd be really interested to see where we are then. Worst moment for the Secretary of State? We've had two.
Well, they're all Gavin Williams.
So the photo with the whip?
Yeah, that was just what is it with stage photographs? I mean, I'm sure you've seen the one with Liz Truss sat down in a home office holding the phone upside down. You're going to stage your picture, at least get someone to check you're holding the phone the right way.
I was just wondering whether this is just a little bit of humour on their part, I don't know, but whether or not it was that photo was done as a bit of a joke, I don't know, and it was released, I
don't know. But the latest ones that Liz Truss has released look like they're a gift to people who are going to convert them into memes, aren't they?
Well, what about though Gavin Williamson can't remember his A-level results? I mean, why can they not just do this in an honest way and say, most people would say, very few people say, oh, I exceeded my expectations on my A-levels. There was a friend of ours who did, but the vast majority don't get their predicted grades. So most people would understand, well, actually, I don't know what happened. I just didn't do as well as I thought, And actually, I think you get a lot of credit if you said, I got 2 E's. Well, look, you got 2 E's and look where you are now. That's amazing.
Yeah. One of the cleverest responses to something like that was when someone asked about all the stuff in the English, adverbial clauses, etc., and challenged the then Prime Minister, did he know them? And his quick back was no, and that's why we need to introduce them into schools now, so that other people can do. Now that for me was a clever way of getting out of it, not just refusing or saying I can't remember.
No, I agree.
Go
on.
The A-level fiasco.
I know.
We've nearly forgotten that, and I know it was the year before, but it was such a fiasco.
Yeah.
But again, how bad it was.
I know, but when you think what an amazing job teachers have done to ensure that we give young people, security in the grade moving forward, and so, as I said a couple of weeks ago, was it 195 grades were changed out of the 5 point something million that were awarded. Well done, teachers. And who is telling me now that we've got to ditch all that and go back to exams? Exams, we do need exams, but what we don't need is everything on the exam. We really do need to bring in this sort of teacher assessment so that it sort of runs in parallel with the exam. It's serving no one. And everybody tells me, actually, the most disadvantaged do really. Honestly, if somebody tells me that, I'd like to see the evidence, not just and in effect, I'd like to see them talking to a group of students who are from some of the most disadvantaged communities to tell me that if they tell me that's what they want, then because they think they're going to do better in that, then actually I'm for it. But they don't tell you that.
But even, Frank, even if you made the argument that for disadvantaged children, it gives them that level playing field and everything else that they say, if they get an A, what needs to lie below that or with that is the amount of effort they have had to put in to get to that. And that's not shown. It doesn't say A, incredible, considering their background, where they've come from, etc. It just says A. I think a far more rounded report system, or I know we record of achievement was supposed to do that a long time ago, but that became a record of everything you've tripped over.
I know.
What we need is a rounded end of school report with some exam results, some views on skills, some views on character and personality.
I agree.
Ability to work as a group.
Yeah, I agree. So what about is it going to be the whip? The most.
Yeah, I think releasing a photograph of you with a whip on your desk is
probably not a good move. Can I suggest that to any current head teachers? It's not a good move.
Yeah.
So what about the worst?
A post photograph taken? Have a look at the background first.
What about the worst moment for any Secretary of State?
Well,
were you shocked?
To suggest?
Well, were you? I was physically shocked when I saw the photograph of Matt Hancock embracing his lover on in the office. The thought that the stupidity of it is that you can imagine CCTV in our schools is all over the place in many schools, but in one of the highest offices of state in the building, he should have thought that it was okay because there would be no cameras to pick him up on this, and that stupidity is beyond the shockingness of seeing him kissing, and then there was a double whammy because I saw the photographs, then I saw the video.
Yeah, I was going to say,
God,
when the photographs were released, I remember saying, "There's more to come on this yet." Because I can't. Was it the Sun newspaper that did it?
It was, yeah.
Because they do that. They release something that whets your appetite, and the ministers can say, "Oh well, maybe it was just
it was nothing. It's just
a moment's embrace because she'd worked very hard. And I wanted to thank her." And then I don't know. What about that wandering hand, Matt?
So what else we got?
That Rob with the sea closed.
I mean, it's
on the beach. Were you in the sea? No, the sea was closed.
The thing is that there are still people. I mean, we had a guest this year, and he has become deeply involved in trying to support teachers who in Afghanistan, some of whom worked for the British and the Americans, who are still there and are still, some of them, in hiding. He was telling me that there was a teacher he's aware of who's hiding in caves, and you think, we laugh about that Rob on the beach, but really that's quite sobering, isn't it? Really,
and particularly when this was predictable.
Yeah.
And it was predictable. I don't care what they say about, well, the speed of it, but well, actually, that was predictable.
Yeah, I know.
When the Americans pulled out, you were leaving, it was a free for all.
So really, between the two, Hancock and Raab, the worst moment for the second,
probably the most serious.
I know. I agree. And actually, yeah, well, it's a debate as to whether or not the replacement of Matt Hancock with the current Secretary of State is an improvement. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with you there, Stan. So what about the greatest challenger to the government this year, that award?
Well, I was impressed by Wes Streeting
in
his recent front bench attacks. That they've been quite.
He's got the right brief now, hasn't he? He's got the right department. He's really. There's a clarity of Wes Streeting's sort of comments and the pointedness of it, which I think is really, he's up there with Yvette Cooper, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, I was going to suggest Yvette Cooper as the other one, who's very, very sharp.
Yeah.
Mind.
But I think actually, didn't we? I mean, we've spoken before about James O'Brien.
Yeah.
I just. The number of hours I've spent listening to him this year, for me, he gets it because of that consistency, on the Brexit issue, on the pandemic response, on the corruption, all of this. I just find his monologues at the beginning of his programs just worth listening to on their own. Forget the way he tears into people, and I think I do find that bit of it a little bit uncomfortable, because he often doesn't let people develop a point. But, I think for me, greatest challenger to the government, unfortunately, is not the Labour Party or whatever. I think it's probably.
I was going to say you could probably include the Good Law Project as well in that.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I agree.
Everything they've done to challenge whether things that have been done were done legally and properly.
Yeah. So. Worst procurement in education? Well, none of these, the things that are on our list here, CO2 monitors, at least I think many of those have they're insufficient in number, but they have arrived. Tutors, many of them, they might have been appointed, but as far as I'm aware, many of them don't turn up. And retired teachers, I don't know where they're coming from. I'm hearing that it's in the hundreds.
25,000, wasn't it? Who have been on the website, but the DFE didn't know how many had actually applied.
Right.
How can you not know?
I know. Well, it's obviously a figure that's so low they don't want to mention it.
Yeah. Well, it pushes. From what I understand, if you go onto the website, it pushes you to an agency.
Oh, right.
Which a lot of people who are thinking, I might go back and offer myself.
Yeah,
you would go directly to the school, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and you'd want to you want to go directly to a school, one that one that's perhaps local, and one where you perhaps have worked before, rather than having to go through an agency. And the agency is all the DBS stuff, isn't it? I suspect that's why they've had to use them, because that system is.
It's also a nice percentage, isn't it?
Yeah. Well.
No,
yes.
We used to run an agency that was an ethical one, where teachers who worked for the agency got a pension. Everything was done. They were paid at the proper going rate. And over the years, because other agencies were much cheaper, the number of schools who bought into the agency we ran dropped.
Right.
But there were some who were absolutely committed, even though it cost more, to doing things right. And part of me says there's not enough of those people around anymore.
No.
Because the pressure for balancing the budget is too great.
So the worst procurement.
Well, in terms of impact, it surely has to be the tutors, doesn't it?
It does.
I don't know of anywhere that's making a success of that.
No. And actually, because they're looking, aren't they, to pull it from Randstad? That was the last I heard. So anyway, I mean, that's all got to play out. That feels as though that's going to die a death, to be honest, which is a real shame, because it should have been around mentoring rather than tutoring. But anyway, that's that battle's been lost.
It should have been about putting the money into the schools and not
Yeah.
putting any restrictions on it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, that's our sort of review of national stuff. Let's get to the bit that we're most interested in, our guests. Well, I can tell you now, Stan, that the most watched episode, and I would say episodes, are those where Susan Brickell turns up. She is so well connected with so many people that the viewing figures, no one gets close to her. No one.
Wow.
It's amazing. I think I worked out that it's something like 15% of all of our viewing figures have come through her videos, her 2 videos this year. It's staggering.
Wow.
And then the most downloaded, because if you're not aware, we put these on YouTube, but we also put them on Spotify and a podcast, a download site called Buzzsprout. And so Jenny Molyneux had the highest number of downloads. So and hers were 4 times greater than anybody else we'd had on. So that's it. Well done to her. I know Susan will always come back when she's and Jenny's coming back with her father, Dave Hewitt, I think in 2022. So again, Dave was very, very popular and brought an HR perspective to stuff, didn't he?
Yeah, Dave's also very proud of Jenny, so that'll be to see them together, because I think there might be a bit of in-family fighting there.
But also Jenny's professional background, she's an eminent child psychologist sort of thing, and it just brings a completely different perspective to it. It brings a sort of level of authority. And talking of that, we did have, I suppose, we did have some real sort of really sort of challenging, controversial guests on, didn't we?
I mean, the subject rather than the than the guest was controversial.
Do you want to sort of just summarize?
Well, we knew there were issues with the ITE market review, and so we knew that Sam Twistleton had been part of that, and I knew Sam from a long time ago, and she was very happy to come on and talk about it, which generated, because of her position on that, I think generated comments from others who didn't necessarily agree with the way the ITE was going, not necessarily the way Sam was talking, because I think actually Sam mitigated some of the major stalling points.
It's difficult though. I felt for her, and I still feel for her, because she did come under attack from colleagues for the fact that she actually joined this group, and I think she just took a position that it's best to be inside their camp or inside the camp wanting to seek change rather than, sort of criticize it from outside, so I felt for her as well. A difficult position to take.
She's fine. She's a tough nut.
Well, talking of tough nuts as well, then Rachel Lofthouse, she was very concerned, wasn't she, about those proposals, rightly so, and was very. I thought, that she laid out really in much greater detail the actual sort of impact of this and the risks to university independence. I think much more so than perhaps Sam did, and I think it was really. Her sort of response did provoke quite a lot of reaction and a lot of support, and a lot of new people joined the chat because, or watched the chat because Rachel was on. So, but not forgetting though, we had the ex-HMI, didn't we, Julie Price Grimshaw?
Yeah, and that certainly generated a lot of stuff on Twitter, particularly.
Yeah.
A lot of people recommending that you watched it and sort out those views. I thought that was, for me, that was probably the one that I got most feedback on. Right.
But I think it'd be difficult to call out one of those 3.
I don't think we should. I think I think they took on the controversial subjects,
Yeah.
and it was really good to air those, I felt.
Well,
And I
two
really-
professors in there, so Julie's doing really
Yeah.
well mixing it with them. What about the most amusing guest?
I think we left that till the end, didn't we? And
I really enjoyed it last time. I really enjoyed
brought
it.
Eric on with his poetry.
Yeah, I know, and it was really nice because it was the day before his wedding anniversary. It was his 45th wedding anniversary, and he read some of the poems. But actually, a few days later, I got the anthology of his 50-odd poems, all beautifully produced in a lovely book, which I think he was going to present to his wife on their anniversary. So, it was really nice to get that. And yeah, I agree. It was a different feel, wasn't it? It was a nice way to end the spell before Christmas.
Yeah, it was.
Now, international guest.
No,
I've got.
Maybe last year, was he?
Who was that?
Have we had an international guest this year?
We have.
Barry?
Yeah, no, we have. We've had. We went to Bogota.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, we went to see Henry May, who was running a charity called the Huracan charity in Bogota. And that was for trying to use sport to use that as a means of educating, sort of disadvantaged young people out there. And so he joined us with Ian Milligan. And again, there were a number of people contacted us wanting to see if they could help. I don't know whether or not those were taken further, but I know that the charity were looking for non-exec directors, and I know somebody who listened to the chat did step forward and have a chat. So I don't know whether that materialized, but I suppose my brother Barry was in Wales, so I suppose he's included.
Well, technically you're international at the moment.
Yeah, I think probably Henry May, because of the distance, and also because
and it was so different.
Yeah.
And really, I think it really caught home that.
Yeah, I agree.
What he was doing was incredible.
He was the first guest of him and Ian were the first guests of 2021. So what about we've got some very enthusiastic followers, haven't we, Stan? So it's difficult to name just 2 or 3 without upsetting everybody else. So please, if your name doesn't appear, don't take it as a slight. But Kendra Allen.
Yeah, he tweets after every episode, and he's very keen and corrects us when we've got things wrong. Which is good.
John Stevens is a good follower as well. He's encouraged us a lot, and your friend Paul Duckworth.
Paul tweets a lot. Yeah, Paul's just really trying to get back on the show again. That's
all right, Paul. We'll let it happen. Yeah. So is it going to go to Kendra? I think it has to, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do. I think it should, because she's been consistent.
I know.
For 2 years now. So yeah.
What about a comment that's been made then? The best comment from somebody who follows us.
There's been the trouble is I can't actually quote it, but there's been some really nice ones, haven't there? Adrian Lyons, I know, made a very nice comment about the 2 professionals. He called us professionals, Frank.
I know.
Nobody's ever called me that before, so that went really high on my list. And John Stevens, as you say, has made nice comments. And there was a third whose name now, Andrew.
I think Andy Hodgkinson said that there was something that Frankenstein Chat had been sort of like the constant sort of support during lockdown, during the pandemic. It's coming from Andy. I mean, very eminent.
Yeah, it felt like very. When I read that, it felt very warm and genuine. And I was actually lifted by that comment.
Me too.
So I don't want to say between the 3 one comment was better than the other, but for those 3, they really made comments that made us feel it was worth doing what we're doing.
Yeah. What about then? Should we move on to your personal best episode?
Right. Well, my personal one was Barry Norris, your brother.
Really? Oh, right.
And I really got the feeling that if I'd known Barry longer than I'd known you, I'd be getting on with Barry better than I get on with you. I think the element was that he was talking about, obviously, he's an HMI in Wales, and the things that they are doing in Wales really chime with my philosophy of education.
Yeah.
I was an easy target, I suppose, really, to say, yes, I agree with all that. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting, and that went quite far, didn't it, that episode?
It did. I mean, for those who aren't aware, but Barry let us know that the Welsh government had viewed it and had uploaded a link to their website. So, you know, that was, and we have tried to get Barry back on. So hopefully we'll get him back in next year.
Can we make it clear, Frank, that's not how you ended up with a caravan in Wales? It
wasn't. No. Actually, one of the sad things, I mean, is I don't see Barry very often at all. It is, you know, it's a sadness I have, but you know, but every time we do meet, it's like, you know, brothers. It is so deep, you know, and I have the greatest respect. He's such. I mean, I read some. If you search online, you'll see some. He's won. He's a Welsh speaker now, and he's won sort of national awards for his poetry. And you know, reading some of that stuff, it's just because you know where it's all coming from, and you understand. I understand, you know, sort of the events that surround some of the poems. You know, so it's very deeply moving. But I tell you what, my favourite, not favourite one, but one that I suppose I enjoyed, the one's coming back, is Neil and Rebecca Smith.
Yeah.
We have the husband and wife headship team. Neil, who's head of an eminent independent school in Stockport, and Rebecca Smith, who's now the head of Sale Grammar, and who was at one of the Colt schools. Yeah, I found that conversation, you know, really, really interesting, and also I think we got a lot of response from the independent sector, because that's an area that we haven't really reached out to before. So Neil did really well in sharing that with his colleagues. So again, we picked up a lot of followers, because, you know, Neil suggested it was worth listening to, and they put it on their school website as well. So, you know, I really enjoyed that chat.
Yeah, I have to say, I thought the Julie Price Grimshaw chat was a good one as well.
I know.
Probably because we were all gunning for the same target, weren't we?
Yeah, and Julie and I have taken that forward, and we're going to hopefully make more of that in the next couple of weeks, as we reach out to school head teachers who have been inspected, who are unhappy with their inspections. So we're hoping to pull that together in the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll hear more about that. I mustn't miss out, you know, talking about family, but actually it was nice to see my daughter Philippa Reed coming on, talking about you know, a current teacher teaching in a primary school, you know, who's extremely clinically vulnerable, and you know, what the school was doing, what she was doing to try and overcome this. And again, this is still, you know, very much in my thoughts as we move into a new term. She starts back, I think, on the 10th. So I'm hoping that there's going to be some measures. I'm not optimistic, but you hope that there would be some measures introduced to try and reduce risk to those people who are extremely clinically vulnerable, not holding their breath.
Everyone would like to see some measures,
yeah.
But now we've got into the mantra of, you know, schools will remain open, which, you know, we need to remind people schools actually never closed.
No.
But, you know, schools will remain open. People are not now even considering mitigation.
No.
It's like, you know, no, we're not talking about schools at all, and they'll just manage. And it's really worrying. It's a cause of concern for me.
We need to look at, I mean, as I do, we need to look at what other countries have done. You know, it is so starkly different. You know, that the whole attitude to this has been different. Let's put it that way.
Even, and that's wrong to say even Wales, but the Welsh government straight away said, right, we're going to open schools 2 days later. And those 2 days are to plan for, you know, a worst case scenario and plan for possibility of moving children to online teaching at very short notice.
Yeah. The issue is now is if there are no lateral flow tests available, how are young people going to be testing themselves before they return to school? I mean, you know, the Prime Minister says everybody has to get lateral flow tested, and doesn't think, oh, hang on, have we got enough lateral flow tests? And then we hear the worst thing is that the Secretary of State says, oh, no, and no one's mentioned this before, there's a world shortage. Well, if that's known, then surely the Prime Minister should not have said we shouldn't all go looking for lateral flow tests, because it's a complete waste of time. They're not available. You know, so it really is, you know, this is sort of government talking to government, isn't it? This is about connections and understanding the consequences of your actions, which actually many head teachers are fully aware of. You know, to bring it all back to head teachers. I mean, many of them will immediately saying you've got to be lateral flow tested. Well, the next question, have we got enough lateral flow tests? The Prime Minister didn't think about that. It's absolutely clear he didn't think about that. Even
if, and from what I gather, the Welsh government have lent the English government 3 million of them.
Yeah, 4 million.
Somewhere else. But then the PCR test. So if you get a positive on a lateral flow, you need to book a PCR test, of which there were none in the country.
No, I know. Anyway, we've got 3 more awards. So, or not awards, but comments and whatever. The most interruptions that we ever had in a recording came in one recording. No, it came in 2 recordings, didn't they? So we had, didn't we have a rabbit?
Lucy with her rabbit, a house
Lucy
rabbit.
Truman with her rabbit. Never thought we'd have a rabbit. I could see a cat or a dog, but not a rabbit. I don't know why I didn't think
a rabbit tried to dig through the wall or something.
And then
I know it's a house rabbit, but
and then we had Laura Edwards, which again was a great chat, wasn't it? Really good chat. And she was doing the recording at her mother's house, I think. And so the dog had to be chased around the house.
She was asking her brother to take the dog up, but I don't think her brother had got up, had he? It was 9 o'clock in the morning. It's not a time for brothers.
But Laura was also the guest that had the shortest notice about being a guest.
Yeah, she said, I'm pretty flexible, so if you're ever got somebody, or you're ever let down, I can probably come in at short notice. And I said, well, funnily enough, tomorrow morning with nobody on. So she did. Really good.
And then the worst outside broadcast.
Yeah,
Stan.
That was when I was in the caravan.
Yeah, and you became, did we say you've become unstable, which we've known for quite some time. Yeah, but actually it was officially announced.
You were with Mark Borden then, the psychologist. He's become unstable. And that was a clinical prescription for me next. That's the problem of Wi-Fi when you're in North Wales.
Yes, I know. Well, which has held up quite well for me today, so I'm really pleased. Stan, is it worth going through and just giving a shout out to all of the colleagues who came
absolutely
on? So I'll run through if that's all right. So then at least we know we've mentioned everybody, and we want to say thank you to Ian Milligan, Henry May, Raksha Patney, Dr. Mike Rotherham, Mark Wilson, Angela Holdsworth, Johnny Mitchell, Ros McMullen, Dr. Mark Borden, Professor Sam Twizzleton, Max Pescastori, who's coming back, Emma Knights, Paul Duckworth, who's definitely coming back, Barry Norris, who we'd love to have back, Susan Brickell, who we can't keep away, Emma Ainsworth, who's on next week as well, Dave Hewitt, who's coming back, Michael Payne, Professor Rachel Lofthouse, Liz Robinson, forgot about Liz, Simon Parkinson, Fiona Miller, Alistair Campbell's wife, Rose Marley, Jenny Molyneux, Neil Smith, Rebecca Smith, Stephen Tierney, Philippa Reed, Judy Price Grimshaw, Colette Denby, yeah, and Anne Morris, and Lucy Truman, Laura Edwards, and finally Eric Craven. So thank you to all of those guests. I hope you've all received your little gifts, and thank you for taking a photograph and tweeting them. We didn't ask them to do that, but it's lovely that they did.
Yeah.
So
what are we going to do about people who've come on twice, Frank?
Wow. Do they get gold plated? Do they get gold plated?
Don't get carried away here.
It costs a fortune. I mean, Stan, it costs you a fortune to send the paperweight to Ottawa or wherever Andy Hargreaves was.
Yeah.
It cost as much as the paperweight, I think, but yeah.
It costs more.
Well, I don't know. 2022, we are lined up with guests into May.
Wow.
Some of these are colleagues that are coming back, but we've got some, I mean, like Dame Alison Peacock from the Chartered College is coming on as a guest. So we're going to have to get our best ties out for that one.
Well, one of us seems to be able to do that at the top of a hat.
Yeah, but I just want to know what's behind that screen, Stan. I want to know.
The chaos in my office.
But we've got, a host of people coming back, and I mean, we thought this would last a couple of weeks, a week at most, and here we are. We'll reach our 100th edition in early May, all being well. So, and I think in that time we've only missed, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, which is quite staggering, really. So,
as long as the government keep giving us stuff to talk about, and so far they've not let us down.
No. And sadly, I think we're going to have quite a lot to talk about next week, because schools will be going back and infection rates will be through the roof, and government will be saying, yeah, but the ICU departments are not being overwhelmed. Yeah, but the hospitals are. Silly idiots. I mean, keeping people out of hospital is crucially important to allow people who haven't got COVID to be treated.
Yeah.
You get COVID as if you get a pass. Particularly it must be so annoying if you're waiting for a hip replacement and COVID beds have been taken up with unvaccinated people. That must be how you cope with that. Those sorts of things. This is what it's doing. So
what's interesting is the press have been very quick to blame teachers for lots of things and blame head teachers and twisting the headlines, as they have done recently with schools are thinking more about holidays than learning. Despite the fact that it's just a shuffle round of days. It's exactly the same number of days. But yet they haven't really gone to town on those people who are sending out false information and who are, as we saw, I'm sure everybody saw on Twitter, wrecking a test centre. The press don't seem to think that's a problem, and I don't understand that.
No, I agree. Okay, well, we've come to the end.
Yeah, I don't think anybody will be sad to say goodbye to 2021.
No. But also, if there's anybody out there watching this who'd like to join us as a guest, you don't need to be an eminent professor. You don't need to be in Bogota. Actually, what we haven't had is a teaching assistant on. I'm trying to think of other roles. We haven't had anybody from children's services.
Maybe I should ask Paul when he's got an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that'd be great. Yeah, that Paul is Stan's son, who is a teaching assistant in Salford or Bolton or somewhere.
Salford,
yeah. So, but if anybody out there who wants to reach out to us, who wants to come on and have a chat, particularly those who perhaps don't always share our views, you're more than happy, to have a little knockabout on here. And anybody that comes on, we always share the video with the guest before we upload it, so the guests can always pull it if they're not happy with it. We don't want to embarrass anybody, so it's entirely up to you. So there is some, there's that level of protection. So please come and join us if you fancy it. And Stan, thank you for your support and help and whatever.
Thank you, Frank, for getting most of the guests.
No.
Your connections that seem to find.
I can't believe, I don't know. It's just, I don't know how this has happened, but it's probably the way. I've just been lucky, to have met some really interesting people.
It might be because I'm that much younger than you that my colleagues are all still in work and yours are all retired.
Of course, Dan. Of course, that's what it is. Anyway, Happy New Year to all of our followers, and thank you, Stan. You have seen me through lockdown. Mrs. Norris, Arlene has been an absolute rock, and but you've been a good second best. So thank you for that.
Oh, talking about people who are absolute rocks.
Oh, thank you, Jill.
Right.
Okay, well, it's goodbye to 2021, and thank you. Hope you've enjoyed the Frankenstein Chat Awards, and hopefully we'll have another set of these in 2022, all being well. So it's goodbye.
Bye.